So thank you for joining me today. I am Tallulah Breslin. I use she, her pronouns. I am a vocally specialized speech-language pathologist. Today, I am giving a talk that we have titled Using Gameplay to Change Your Gender Presentation for Therapeutic Purposes. So first, I want to tell y'all a little. I don't have any financial interest or relationships to disclose related to this talk. So first, I wanted to tell y'all a little bit about my journey, how I got here. I had worked in nursing homes for 5 years as a speech-language pathologist after working in the schools, and then COVID hit. And at first, I tried to play along and do all of the cleaning and the plasticware, as you can see what I was working in. And then my clients started to die, and then they shortened how long I could work with clients for, and it got to be a bit too much. And I decided last year to start a private practice, which worked out really well because I ended up finding voice training. And that's worked really well. Just by happenstance, the majority of the people who come to me to work with me have wanted to do voice training to help change the gender presentation of their voice. And that's given me a lot of opportunity to explore how somebody can change their voice. Back when I worked in the nursing homes, I was really effective as a speech-language pathologist, but I wasn't as effective at communicating with my coworkers. I didn't really understand how to change my voice, and I understood the effect that my voice had on people when I was feeling that they needed to urgently help me with something, but not how to change it. And this journey that I've gone on to change the gender presentation of my clients' voices has helped me realize how I can change my own voice so that the listener receives the message that I want them to hear. For example, if I wanted a nurse to help me and I said, "Hey, I need you to intubate them right now. This is really urgent," I'm probably less likely to get them to come quickly than if I say, "Hey, I really need help with this person. Could you please help me intubate them?" It's just a little bit of change that has changed how it is that people hear me. And that's been very, very helpful in my own life. And that's part of what I do with my work, which these days is mostly voice training and teaching other individuals how to be intentional with their voice training, with their own voices, as well as advocacy. So let's talk about our learning objectives for today. First, I want to help everybody build a gender-inclusive vocabulary so that we're all coming from the same knowledge base. And then we're going to talk about how our voice impacts listeners in a little bit more depth. I also am going to teach y'all how to use some different materials with your voices to use these skills I'm going to teach therapeutically. And then the most fun part is I'm going to teach how to change your own voice gender expression. So we're going to have some workshop-y aspects. I do want y'all to know we are going over some topics that can be a little bit more sensitive or unfamiliar, and all levels of knowledge and all questions are welcome in this space. We're all here to learn. And I do ask that you be open to any work that we personally need to do or that we need to do together so that we can all grow into being the inclusive and culturally responsive individuals that our clients want us to be and that our communities need us to be. So this is the first slide. This is the genderbread person, which is kind of a fun way of differentiating some of these concepts. It's a very simple way to see the difference between gender identity, gender expression, sex assigned at birth, and sexual or romantic orientation. Each of the terms that I just listed defines a spectrum that is within all of us and is defined independently. So I like to use mathematical graphs to express these concepts, make it kind of gives it a good way to understand it visually. But this is assigned sex at birth. So when we're born, we're either assigned male or female. In other countries, we may be assigned intersex. 1.7% of us are born with differences in sex traits or reproductive anatomy that don't align with the binary sex characteristics of male or female. And here they would be assigned male or female, or if somebody had differences or missing genitalia, they would also be assigned male or female. So some of these next concepts, I'm going to use ternary plots to communicate, and this slide is explaining how to read these Basically, if you look at the triangle up at the top, it means that whatever this concept is doesn't apply to you. And at the bottom, it means that it does. And then there's different ways that these concepts can apply to you, or it could only apply to you some, in which case you'd be more in the middle. So this is probably the most complicated slide that I have conceptually. But for those here who aren't familiar with the concept of varied gender identities, there's a lot of different terms that are being used now to express gender identity. Gender identity is a deep-seated internal sense of being or knowing, and it's not necessarily visible to others. Everyone has a gender identity. These terms that you can see here are basically umbrella terms that can mean a lot of different things, but at their core, a trans man or a transgender man or a trans woman or a transgender woman are people whose gender identity is different than the sex that they were assigned at birth, but who still identify as being on the gender binary scale. A non-binary person is someone who doesn't fully identify with the gender binaries of male or female. You will see that they're in the middle, right? There's some, but not all. There's some other concepts here. Two-spirit is a Native American term, dual gender, that you encompass both genders within yourself, that all genders are your gender would be pangender. There's a lot of different terms that people use, and what's most important is just to use whatever term that somebody uses about themselves. And I also think here it's really important to know that if you aren't trans, that it's not just the absence of being trans, that you're cis, and that you understand that cisgender is a space that you sit in, because there's power structures and privileges at play here. And in order to disrupt those inequalities, we need to know our position within these systems. Okay. So I had talked about how each of these are independent variables, and this is the gender expression, which is how we dress ourselves, how we speak, how we walk, how we talk. There's gendered stereotypes that correspond with different gender expressions and how they manifest in our communication behaviors. And we can be very intentional with the choices that we make. My realm that I kind of live in is this communication realm, where I can change how my voice sounds in a whole lot of really different ways, so that the people who are listening to me might not actually think that the gender expression that I use is actually the same thing. Or maybe it's very different. You can change so many different things about your voice, which is what we're going to do later. How you dress, how you walk, how you talk. These are all elements of gender expression. Sexual orientation, another variable, and it's who you're attracted to physically, and then you can also be romantically attracted. I'm spending a lot of time on these slides, but they're just, the important thing is to know that they're independent concepts. I do want to take a moment just to go over one of the terms that I think might be a little less familiar. On the last slide, we had demisexuality, and this slide we have demi-romantic, but people who identify in this way only experience sexual or romantic attraction after they make a strong emotional connection with that person. So here are pronouns. A personal pronoun is a form of speech that stands in for a person or a group of people. So my pronouns are she, her, hers. My husband's pronouns are he, him, his. I have friends whose pronouns are they, them, theirs. I personally have not had anyone tell me that they use neopronouns, which is like they, zer, them, fey, for, fey, self, but there are people who do. And the most important thing to use is to use the pronouns that a person uses about themselves. And when you don't know the pronouns that somebody uses, you can use they, or you can use their name. Some people use all pronouns, which is like a rotating list of pronouns, which is fun. So my friend Dusty came over yesterday and she had a really fun time playing the piano, but he didn't want to sing, and I'm not sure why they didn't want to sing yesterday. Maybe they weren't feeling good, which is kind of fun. And then some people use any pronouns, which just means that they're not attached to having any used, and you're welcome to use any with them. So sometimes some of these identities that someone has don't match up, and that can cause gender dysphoria. Dysphoria is intense, persistent discomfort with how someone's body and mind relate to the gender that they're perceived as. And when an individual's different gender identity spectrums are incongruent, they may experience gender dysphoria. And I know we talked about pronouns a minute ago. Misgendering someone with using the wrong pronouns can trigger dysphoria, that others aren't seeing you or understanding who you are. Sometimes when people have dysphoria, they make a choice to transition, which is the process of changing one's gender expression and or physical characteristics to better align with their gender identity. Not everyone chooses to transition. Not everyone who transitions has gender dysphoria. Everyone's transition is different. People can have social transitions, medical transitions, legal transitions, and everyone's transition is different. It's really important. Something that we can all do is share our own pronouns and pronoun people correctly so that we're not just misgendering them. It's really important because 41% of transgender individuals attempt suicide in their lifetimes, and that number decreases by half when their pronouns and identities are affirmed. So this is something that we actively can do in our work to help protect our clients and our friends. So action steps, which is easy thing. You can add your pronouns after your name on social media, in your Zoom name, and email footers, basically anywhere that you have your name, you can put your pronouns. Some of us have pronoun privilege where the pronouns that people assume about us are the same as the pronouns that we use. And so we have no distress about pronouns. But for people who are gender diverse and who do not have pronoun privilege, when they share their pronouns, they're opening a door for emotional and sometimes physical harm. So while it might feel new, uncomfortable, or different to share your pronouns if you're cisgender, it's really imperative that the burden to share first shouldn't and can't always be on gender diverse individuals. So here's a very lovely list that my office manager wrote about some of the reasons to include pronouns with our names. To summarize, basically, we're helping prevent misgendering, and we're showing that we support gender diverse individuals. We're communicating that we won't assume other people's genders. We're letting other people know that we won't assume their pronouns, and we're helping educate other people about differences in pronoun. So sometimes in conversation, we want to know someone's pronouns, or we want to open up a space where they can share their pronouns with us comfortably and safely. So you never want to require someone's pronouns, and you can use first person they or a person's name until you know their pronouns. So when you're going to ask for someone's pronouns, you're going to first share. Hi, my name is Tallulah. My pronouns are she, her, and I'll be the SLP working with you today. It's so nice to meet you. Or more simply, hi everyone, I'm Tallulah, she, her. So if possible, you can then watch to see what pronouns somebody else uses, or if they don't share, you can ask. Most people use she, her, or they. My pronouns are she, her. What are yours? Or more simply, what are your pronouns? It's always better to ask than to assume wrong. Sometimes we make mistakes, and that's okay. A mistake in this context would be misgendering someone, which is using incorrect gendered language to or about another person. Even if the person isn't there, you're still misgendering them. And there's a few things that you can do. First, you don't want to linger on how sorry you feel. Then you're putting this burden on the person. So you just want to correct yourself and then move on. Again, you're only using they or their name until you know their pronouns. If you're in a situation where you hear somebody else get misgendered, you can gently recast. So that would look like, he went to the park. Oh, she went to the park? Or you can gently correct, he went to the park. I think that she uses she pronouns. So remember, we can't know anyone's gender or pronouns just by looking at them. So that was my first section to make sure we were all starting from the same place. Do y'all have any questions about gender inclusive vocabulary? I don't actually have it where I can see the chat. Okay, I do not see any questions having popped up. So this is really cool. Resilience idea. I think y'all are all game, so you'd understand this, but we just got through this section, so let's all do, yeah! Our little power stance. Yeah! Build resilience. Okay, cool. Yeah, fantastic. So next, we're going to get into voice and how voice impacts listeners. So when we use our voice and someone hears us, they're listening to our voice more than they are listening to our message, to our words. The voice that we use influences how well they remember our words, how willing they are to listen to what we say, and how comfortable they are engaging with our message. There's a few things that we can do to help our voice have the impact that we're looking for. We can plan ahead of time. If we have a message that's very important that someone hear, we can consider a message and be intentional about what voice we're going to use to communicate it and what words we're going to use to communicate it. In the communication interaction, we can observe if we're not getting the message we want. We can adjust that message, how our voice is being used. And then we can also take a step back and review later and consider if a different voice recipe would have been more likely to get the response you were hoping for, and then try that voice recipe in the future. These are some of the ways that listeners interpret our voices. So I know y'all are muted. During the rest of this presentation, y'all are absolutely welcome to do any of this along with me. So the first thing is volume. So if I'm going to use a louder volume and I'm going to express more with my volume, then you're going to assume that I'm being more aggressive or assertive. Or if I also pair it with a high pitch, you're going to think that I'm really excited when I'm changing my volume. Yeah, so exciting. And then on the other hand, if I'm really quiet, even if everything else has stayed the same, you're going to think maybe I'm not sure about what I'm saying or that I'm shy. There's a melody to the way we vary our pitch, and every different variable about your voice has one end and the other. That's like, I can have the absolute most flat voice that almost sounds like a robot and doesn't change at all. That's called monotone, but like robot monotone. And if you have a really monotone voice, then people aren't going to really be listening to you. They're going to kind of feel disconnected and uninterested, and I don't know how long they're going to keep watching my presentation if I'm really just this boring. However, if I use a really, really melodic voice, oh my god, this is just such the most melodic voice. I think you probably might have noticed some like Valley Girl in there. You probably don't think I'm very smart anymore, but I can use a voice that's somewhere in the middle. It probably is a little bit more pleasant to listen to and keeps your interest. If I go faster sometimes and then I go slower and I kind of mix it up a little bit, then it's interesting and it allows speakers to place emphasis on pauses. So I really want you to hear this word right here. On the other hand, if I use a really slow rate, even if I'm still having other variables, it kind of seems like, I don't think you get it. Yeah. And then this one, so pitch is different depending on how people gender your voice. But if you are using a feminine perceived speech pattern and you use a higher pitch voice, people are going to perceive you as younger and less intelligent. So if I'm talking like this and I really, really want to get that promotion at work and I go in and I'm like, oh, could I please have $10 more an hour? I'm totally worth it. I did 3 people's job in 1 week. Could I have that? You're probably not going to get your raise. And this is actually why people's feminine speakers' pitch has lowered in average pitch over the last couple of decades, because if a lower pitch gets you taken more seriously, people use it. So now let's talk about voice recipes. So I wrote down some fun voice recipes here that we can try. So the first one is sexy voice recipe. So we can even just read along the words that I wrote on here if you want to try these voices out. So sexy voice recipe, we're going to be quieter and we're still going to have a lot of melody, but we're going to get slow and breathy. And I really want to tell you all about this really sexy voice that I'm using. And this is probably not the best voice to use in therapy. This won't make your clients very comfortable. I just don't think so. Or another voice that's not very good for therapy is anxious. So I'm really constricted. So let me show you what that means real quick. Quick way to do this is if you pull up on your chair, you can really feel that you're super constricted. Your false folds are making it so they're trying to protect your airway. That's constricted. Most people don't constrict that much, but anxious voice is a little bit constricted and it's a little bit breathy and it's fast, and sometimes I might stutter over my words because I'm so uncomfortable talking and I'm just not really sure whether or not this is the voice that I should be using for therapy, but maybe not, I don't know. Wait, what was I talking about? I don't know anymore. So maybe not that one. This is a pretty powerful voice if you can get presidential voice recipe down. So presidential voice, we're going to be very smooth. So we just talked about constriction. The opposite of constriction is laughing. Oh, I'm so open when I laugh. Or if you breathe, if you hear your breath, you have some amount of constriction, which is that same amount of closure there with your false folds. A way that you can kind of find that constriction is if you go back and forth between silent grunting and laughing. You can kind of feel that point. And sometimes it helps that if you find your pitch first, because then you'll be able to tell where this is happening. So that's coming from here. Now I'm going to do my silent grunting and laughing. Oh, I can feel it's happening here above my, above the place that my voice comes from. And if I open that up so it's more like how my breath is, and I have really smooth speech, and then I'm going to go low and I'm going to go slow and I'm going to make myself a little bit louder. I'm going to have my volume and my rate vary. This is my more presidential voice. Please come and vote. Then you could be sick. This is going back to constricted, a little bit more like this, and I might have a little fry, and I'm so whiny because I just really don't feel good. Can I go home from work yet? I just feel really sick. Office drone. This is when you really, really don't want to be there. So you keep your pitch really flat and bored. You're probably not going to talk loud because you don't care who hears you. You might go kind of slow. Yes, I answered all 62 of the phone calls today. Can I go home? No, I don't want to file that 10 stacks of paper. Thank you. Goodbye. And announcers. So these are people who've worked really hard on their voices. They want to have a very smooth, so constriction, huge amount of emphasis on your sound. Going back to constriction. So people who train their voice to sound lovely make it so that they don't have constriction. It's called retraction of your false folds. But if you think about Disney princess voices or people who are rich and in charge, they all have these sort of stereotypical voices. I would like you to put that box right over there. Thank you. It's an unconstricted sound. And if you want to clean up your own sound, you can learn how to talk without that constriction. This voice announcer, we're going to be very smooth, unconstricted, a little bit dark, and we're going to talk slower, but not breathy. Well, I would love to sell you this couch right here. This is the most beautiful couch, and I think you'd really like to buy this couch. Oh, and then mime. I put this one in to be funny, but really, you can be very entertaining with your mimes, just not audible. Okay. So that was mostly just going over how our voice impacts people. So I kind of started to show you all some different ways to change your voice. And I don't think the chat is even showing up. So if anyone has said anything, you would have to tell me, because hold on, let me try being quiet and then see if I can open it. Hi. There we go. Okay, I don't see anything. So, all right, let me know if there's any questions. Have y'all worked with your voices at all? Not sure who I'm talking to here. Is this new? A little bit? So, I know at least one person here has worked with their voice some. Okay, so I'm about to show you a slide, and I don't want you to read it. So I put it in because I wanted all of the variables that are involved with changing your voice to be present in this set of slides, so that when people are rewatching this and they want to know what they are, they can see it. But if you try to read it, your head will explode. Also, they are not in any particular order. So we're just going to sit in this. The only thing to note here is your personal mixing board, which is what you use to form your voice. Okay, moving right along. So let's talk about your personal voice recipe. We all have one. This is the delicious result of the ingredients we're mixing together to make our voice. I have a couple of those variables on the right. The changes in your pitch pattern, your stress, your tone, how fast you're going, the volume that you use. All of these are things, technically everything that was in that really long slide that I asked y'all not to read, all of those things are in each one of our voices. But if we haven't worked on our voice, we don't know what they are. We just talk the way that we talk. And so I'm going to show you some fun, different recipes, 5 different ways. This is a little bit more participatory. So this is the captain of the guard, or the general. This is the voice that we speak with authority and we're trustworthy. So let me ask, do y'all have any interest in turning your sound on and working on your voices with me, or do y'all want me more to lead it and we stay silent? It's up to y'all. I can help you with your voice play if you turn on your volume. Hey, hi.
Hi, I'm Hanne, and I am a Norwegian LARPer, so I'm not so well in English, but I think I can play out roles pretty well.
Okay, that's great. I love your accent. Menachem Kohen?
Menachem.
Menachem.
Rock'em, sock'em, Menachem.
Rock'em, sock'em. I like it. And I like the way that you explain it. That's cool. Okay, so this first voice recipe is captain of the guard or general. So we're going to speak with authority and trustworthy. We want to have good posture because we want to support this big, strong voice that we're going to use. So we're going to lower our pitch down. So, right, if we're normally talking here, we're going to just drop it. Pitch is super easy to change. We all do it all the time. And then we're going to have glottal fry. So I'm going to show you how to do glottal fry. It's the that's the
Excuse me, Tallulah, do you want us to all use our voice at the same time?
Y'all are, I love it. This is the world I live in. I want to hear your voice. Yes, please.
At the same time, everyone.
So we're trying to do glottal fry, which is this. Yeah, it's like a gravelly noise. And if you're having trouble finding it, the opposite of the gravel is breathy. So like, so you can go between it. So that's happening in the same place. So how we're using this in our We're in Charge recipe is by putting it at the end. So we're going to add in a little fry at the end. So let's do, I am the best therapist ever. So as the captain of the guard, we're all going to say, I am the best therapist ever. So we're going to speak with authority. We are firm in our posture, supportive, we're anchored, and we're going to use these. This is kind of more of a masculine pattern, but we're lowering our pitch, we're varying our volume, and we're going to end in glottal fry. I am the best therapist ever. 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 You can go even lower, Hannah. I am the best therapist ever.
I am the best therapist ever.
Yeah. That is great. You are an excellent therapist. I can tell. I believe you. Because when you speak with authority, people trust you. Okay. So this one's not so much learning how to use a voice as it is the mismatch. So if our voice and our facial expressions don't match, people don't trust us. So I am the best therapist ever. Right? I mean, I am the best therapist ever, right? Like anything you do with your face that doesn't match what you're saying is going to make people not believe you. So let's try a little bit of mismatch. I am the best therapist ever. I am the best therapist ever. I am the best therapist ever. I am the best therapist ever.
I'm the best.
I'm the best.
Yeah.
I'm the best therapist ever.
I don't believe any of y'all. Y'all are just confusing me. I don't understand. Also notable here is that flighty emotional voices are perceived as feminine because, you know, lovely binary culture that we live in. So if you do this where you mismatch and you have this really like emotional voice and your face doesn't match, people are going to be really confused. So the barkeep, the friendly person, the person that everybody wants to talk to, this is a really good voice for a therapist because people trust you. They want to talk to you. I also like this cake recipe the best out of all of them. This is the cake I want to eat with all the strawberries piled on top. So yeah, definitely let's make this one. So we're going to have more fluctuation. Our melody pattern is going to change a little bit more. Our volume. So if we're using volume to stress, we would say, I am the best therapist ever, right? If we're using pitch to stress, I'd be, I am the best therapist ever. Pitch, using pitch to stress, perceived as feminine. Using volume to stress is perceived as masculine. So depending on how you want to do it, you can have a friendly person voice in masculine or feminine stereotypical pitch range. So wherever you're comfortable, we're just going to have a very varied, friendly, open voice. I am the best therapist ever. I am the best therapist ever. I really am the best therapist. I am the best therapist ever.
I'm the best therapist ever.
I am the best therapist ever.
That's a very convincing voice. And there's a match between your facial expression and your voice, which helps. But yeah, so I can have some changes in my tone. Also, if we're looking to be trustworthy and be given authority, we drop our larynx down. So if y'all swallow, you'll see that your larynx pops right up, right? So you can make your larynx move in lots of different ways. It can also go down. So if we press it down with our throat, then it's going to be lower, right? So we're making it go down. Bigger instrument. The people who already have longer vocal tracts can also do this. Everybody's larynx can go down a little lower. You're just using your throat to push it down. You can find your larynx and feel by lowering your jaw is a really fast way without spending a lot of time on it to learn, and then swallow will make it go up. Another way to make it go up if you want to feel what it's like to have a much smaller voice is to have a really high E that you don't say out loud. So it went up, right? And then you have a small... Okay, I'm going to skip the next one and come back to it since we started in on larynx. So this is for a teeny tiny voice. If we do our silent E and we make our larynx pop up, then we're now having a smaller instrument. There's other ways, right, is small instrument, and there's other ways that we can make our instrument smaller. We can have our tongue be higher up. We can tighten our nose. Like, if y'all can probably do a nasal voice. I am the best therapist ever. I just absolutely am so good. I am the best therapist ever. Like the nanny. So you're tightening the top of your mouth. I am the best therapist ever. I am the best therapist ever.
Best ever.
I
am the best
therapist ever.
I am the, yeah. So if
best therapist ever.
Ever, yeah.
Ever.
So if you do that alone, it sounds very nasal, right? But if we pop up our larynx, because we did a silent E first, then, and we also have a little bit of that, but not too much. Now it's a little bit brighter, right? Do you want to say, I am the best therapist ever?
I am the best therapist ever.
I am the best therapist ever with this teeny tiny little voice.
This therapist.
I
I'm the best therapist ever.
Yeah, so another way that you can make your voice smaller is in your throat. So there's 3 different places in your throat that you can make it smaller. These are our kitty cats. So a happy kitty cat makes the top of their throat smaller. Rawr, rawr. Happy kitty. Rawr, rawr, rawr. Y'all can do it too. Rawr, rawr. And then if we go down a little bit, this is like, you need to feed me right this minute. Rawr, 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 rawr. And then if we go one more step down, this is the I'm so mad you just stepped on my tail kitty cat. Rawr, 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 rawr. Yeah, so now we have another place. We can make ourselves small at our nose. We can make our rawr in our throat, and we can do our silent E. So let's make ourselves really, really tiny, such a tiny little voice with our larynx going up and a little bit of nasal and our kitty cat. How tiny a voice can y'all get? Itty bitty voice?
I'm the best therapist.
I am the best therapist ever.
I'm trying to be the best therapist ever.
Tiny. It's like a little kid wants to be a great therapist. Other things, so this is the little halfling, right? So if you're playing a character who's a small little creature, they have a small body, so their instrument is smaller. Their voice is a thin and, oh goodness, okay, concepts. So thin is like, I have this really clean sound like a puppy dog. This is really clean. I am the best therapist ever. So do y'all feel with the puppy dog whipper? It kind of feels to me like something at the back of my mouth is tightening. I am the best therapist ever. Y'all want to try?
I am the best therapist ever.
Best therapist ever.
I am the best therapist ever.
And Hannah, your voice is already thin. The other 2 people playing along, I think their voices are thicker. But if you do that, then you can have, and thin voices are super important if you want to sound femme, especially if you're AMAB, a sign male at birth. Prosody here, like, I am the best therapist ever. So we have this tiny instrument, and then we also want to have a sing-song pitch. So this little girl comes around and she's very sing-songy. So she's going for a walk, and this is, I am the best therapist ever. That's much more. Okay, I'm gonna go back a step to the voice that is the calm priest voice. This is a very soothing, welcoming, and disarming voice. Calm creature level 5, or priest. Please come into our sanctuary. There's a little bit of breath. It's a slower voice. but not slower in the we just say everything slower, like gradual. We're kind of smooth. It's dark, so our larynx will be lower. And you can be thick. You can add the fry in. Some priests add a lot of fry. But we're going to go down. We're going to have a very comforting, I am the best therapist ever. I am the best therapist ever. I am the best.
I am the best therapist ever.
Brennan, I think you could be darker. Bigger instrument.
I am the best therapist ever.
I am the best
I'm the
therapist
best
ever.
therapist ever.
I am the best.
I think you could be bigger.
Therapist
Both of y'all.
ever.
Big instruments, right? So our tongue is going to be a little bit lower. Our larynx isn't going to be popped up at all. I am the best therapist ever. Please come into my temple. I am the best therapist ever.
I am the best therapist ever.
I am the best therapist ever.
You have a bit of a twang. Can you open up so the opposite of kitty cat?
I
for Brennan.
am the best I am the best therapist ever.
You hear how much softer that sounded when you didn't add the twang?
I am the best therapist ever.
Yeah. This?
Best therapist ever.
Yeah, you have like priest voiced when you started. I know. Oh, you're a rabbi. Well, that explains your name. Hi, I'm Jewish. Nice to meet you. I figured that you were probably in the realm of having a speaker's voice. That's what you kind of were talking like. Like people would listen, right? When you use this voice, if you think about a priest, I would listen and come into your temple. This is a lovely place to be. Tell me all your sorrows.
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. Cliche masculine voice right here, definitely. And okay, that was fun voice exploration. Do y'all have any questions? Any other voice stuff? Thoughtful looks? Okay. Y'all are like, we learned all the things. We're good to go. All right, yay! We learned all the things. Woohoo! Very good. Fantastic. Okay. So now let's apply this, how we can use our new voice recipes therapeutically. So we're going to go over some games that you can play therapeutically during group sessions, and then also some will be also accessible one-on-one. These, using your voice, like separate from just knowing the influence you have with different voice qualities, using vocal play can make difficult topics be approachable. It can have engaging activities to keep clients attentive and participating in what you're doing. And okay, from speech therapy background, you address problem solving, social skills, attention, all of these meta executive functioning abilities. There's a lot that games do. And if you're doing this with gender play, you can recognize, affirm, honor, and respect queer identities and create safe spaces for clients to show up as they are. So first game, utter nonsense. So I pulled the pictures from the children's version of the game, but I have the adult version because, you know, I buy adult versions. It's basically like this. Every card has either a voice recipe on it or a phrase. So we're going to use the game. Ooh, yeah. So side note, there are some cards in here that you probably don't want to use therapeutically. For example, orgasm voice is absolutely great for working on like a thin, breathy voice, but probably not in therapy. Let's do that one at home. So we're going to use this game to break down barriers and get clients to lower their guard. This game is already a vocal game. You don't have to do a lot of changing other than, so I haven't looked through the family edition because I have the adult edition, but with the adult edition, even if you have adult clients, you probably want to pull some of the cards out. One of the good ways to use this game for me as a voice coach is as an alternative to funny statements. So I have all of my clients initially make a list of 10 sentences that are either the things that they're most likely to want to like these are situations where it's really important for their voice to sound like the gender that they want it to be perceived as, or these are things that they say often. And so we'll use those 10 sentences with this game. You can also come up with phrases that might be said in situations that they're finding are challenging in everyday life, or there's common scripts that they would be using in public interactions if you're working more with anxiety or discomfort in public situations. Okay, so let's see, go to the next one. So here are some of the cards that are already in the adult version of the game and what they work on. So for masculine voice, the New Yorker and Bostonian, also like a New Jersey voice, has the belt. So that's, if you want to find belt, you can kind of like do an ah and then go up, oh, and oh, kind of gets you there. But it's like, hey man, how you doing? Right? So you're loud, even though you're not really trying to be loud, because that's right, anchored, big loud boom. Southern gentleman, Russian is a very dark and low voice. Robot, monotone. Glottal onset, so like there's not a lot of breathiness. Mumble, you can have a little bit more pursed lips if you're not really pronouncing your sounds. If you're working on a feminine voice, Jewish. Hi, I'm your Jewish grandmother. I'd like you to feed me right now these 16 bagels that I made. Right, like nasal is in French. I actually don't have a good French accent. I don't know if Fiona's still here. She did one. Yeah. Fiona, you want to show a French accent? No, she loves it when I put her on the spot. Does anyone here have a French accent? You want to show? It can't be worse than mine.
It's been a long time. J'ai étudié français depuis 30 ans. J'ai oublié beaucoup de mots de français.
So you didn't do the like hyper nasal ones, but it was more nasal. It's not as nasal as like Frandreshire, right? But it's nasal. French is definitely more nasal.
Je parle un peu de français.
Nay, yeah, it's like tight up at the top a little bit, right? What's actually happening is at the back of your mouth. So if you have like g, ng, or e, you can feel there's like the little nasal gate that opens and closes. So it's closed for g, 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 open a little bit for ing, and then, sorry, I said that backwards. It is open for ga ga ga, which would be like this. It would be partially open for ing, and then it will be all the way closed for e, a sound that doesn't have any nasal. So you're basically having your velum partly open for all the different things that I was saying. Valley Girl, oh my goodness, just the tiny little toddler voice. Work on making your sound brighter or melodic. Miming to work on nonverbals, and then the British Australian twang. Retract your tongue is the helium voice. Pooping your grandma, very good false fold constriction, which is normally what we work on getting rid of, but that's the way to add it in. And then whispery voice is a very breathy voice. There's 2 different ways that you can add breathy. You can have your breathy voice be still with your still like keeping your rate going pretty fast, so it's all happening quickly. Or you can be more gradual and breathy, which is where we like start descending down into the like, I'm gonna sell you something on the street corner voice. Fairytale Gloom. This is another fun game. So this is taking classic fairy tales that aren't actually so fabulous. Like, I don't know if y'all have paid any attention to what classic fairy tales actually say, but they're not so fabulous. And so it is actually bad things happening to your characters. The goal of the game is for you to have all 4 of your characters to have unhappy endings before everyone else and get all the points. I actually think this game is really good for working on difficult concepts because they come up naturally in this very gloomy game. And super good for COVID. The cards are like clear plastic. Like, I like it for camping, but they're like, you can wash them in a sink and it doesn't damage them. The flip side of them being clear is you might need a background to see them. Okay, so basically everyone's going to get 4 cards that are their characters, and so they can pick characters that go along with the voices. So like Snow White, Cinderella, right? Like if you want to work in a feminine voice, you pick characters that you think of as having feminine voices, or whatever it is that you're looking for the sound, because some people just really want to sound like very wolfy. This is the voice that they're going for, so they can play the wolfy character. So that wasn't my first attempt at having a masculine voice, was very wolfy. So during the game, whenever you play a modifier or an unhappy ending on a character, I always read out what was happening. But when I started using this therapeutically, we started using the different voices of the characters, so that the assigned voice that went with the character would match whatever event. And you can improv, or you can just read what's happening. And this is an example. So I find a lot of people have trouble reading the cards as they are. And so we kind of paired the need to think about what the voice accent is with what that character is. So I wrote 3 different ways to do a recipe depending on how familiar somewhere is. So the left recipe for Goldilocks, this is my Goldilocks voice. I'm very relaxed. I'm very smooth, right? Those are a lot of terms that people who are working on their voice very specifically would know, but probably y'all aren't as familiar with. If somebody is working in their voice, but they just want to focus on the most important aspects to get, we might just write those. So the, well, little girl, would you like to go for a walk, would be more witchy. And then I wrote for the Joe the Giant, this isn't really about my voice. This is just, I'm trying to play this game for another reason, kind of voice. So big voice. Who's at my door? I want to know. You can be booming. I want to know who's at my door. And it's smooth, and you can belt too if you want it, but it's basically whatever voice that they're going to use for that character, you can write down. You don't have to put cards under them that are a different color, but I do think it makes it easier to see. And I have one last game, One Night Ultimate Werewolf. So this game is a very quick game. This one I think is great for therapy because it's literally a 10-minute game, though in my experience, everything is like 3 times as long, but even a 30-minute game is a short game. You may be able to play it at more than once during a session because of how fast it is, and people do like it. They're basically assigned a role, and you solve for finding the werewolf. So you have the DM. So if it's a therapist, the therapist would be the DM in that kind of situation who would run it. So the therapist or whoever's running it will pass out the cards, and everybody gets a character. So when I use this for voice play, we take the cards from the utter nonsense game, and everybody also gets a voice. So while they're playing, regardless of what character they were given, right? Because you don't want anyone to know anyways, you also use that voice card that you were assigned. So if you were assigned British, then you would use a British voice throughout the game. And it can also be engaging and keep people involved in multiple ways, make it more memorable. So I think I already started talking about, yes, so we're combining them using different voices, and the person who's leading it can also use a different voice, either more commanding to pass important information to the players, or if you want to be engaging so that people are kind of, if they're hesitant about participating or not that motivated to participate. Okay, this is really, really helpful. And I found this helpful both in the speech therapy voice training concept and in other concepts in general. So I tend to work a lot with people who are younger. And when you both have all of the discomfort of being a teenager and gender dysphoria when you hear your voice, it can be particularly difficult to do voice practice. So say I'm like, let's do this new thing. And they're like, no, that's not comfortable. Then instead we can do it in the context of role play. So, all right, you're in a forest. It's dark. You can barely see. There's thick vines all around you. You have a heavy bag at your waist. What do? Okay, you and the person's going to role play each of the characters and the activities that you say. Okay, so they choose, they're going to reach into their bag and pull out a lantern, and they're going to use the voice of whichever character. So you're at a market and there's a lady who comes up with a big basket of apples. What does she say? Apples, apples for sale. No, she's much older than that. Let's use an old lady voice. Apples, apples for sale. Let's buy some apples. These apples only $1 a piece. And like just go through one by one characters. Especially if they like doing role play, this can be really good. And you can like flip through a lot of voices very quickly. And then you can step back afterwards and do that review. Which of those voices sounded the most like what the voice in your head sounded like? What did you like about the apple seller's voice? And kind of talk about it using their normal voice. But now they've literally practiced all these different voices because people who play role play often use different voices. Games are like role play is fantastic for this. You can also do this to role play doing uncomfortable situations at work, ordering food, anything that you want to role play using your voice is fantastic. All right, are y'all ready to use your voices therapeutically? Do you have some new ideas? Yeah? Any questions? You look like you have a question.
Are you set up to use these games online, like the card games, or is it all in person?
I have one client who's a child who I see in person. Everyone else is online. So the way that I do things, okay, I have a slide problem. I have like probably 10,000 slides. So I use Google Slides, and everything that's a game, I have visuals for. Everything that I use in any kind of therapy that I do, I have visuals for. So anything that I want to do, I recreate electronically. I also do boom cards, which is kind of like a Google slide, but more interactive. So if I want to be able to give the mouse over to the client where they can actually click on stuff and play the game, then I'm going to use boom cards. If I want it where it's just a visual that they can hear, then I'm going to use Google Slides. But yes, I have a lot of slides, and yes, I'm doing it all virtually. Do you do any sort of virtual versus in-person right now?
Wait, I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Oh, are you doing virtual or in person?
Oh, everything's virtual. But like, I was just thinking about if you were going to do voice training with someone who is trans and transitioning, can you do it all virtually with all the games, just like you were talking about?
Yes.
I didn't want to assume.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when you're trying to work with someone that is inherently an uncomfortable subject, I think that it actually works better to be in a situation that is comfortable to them. So when they're going to come to me virtually to do voice training, they're sitting in a space that they know that they have me contained in this little box on their desk. Nobody else is going to hear them. They're not going to have to interact with people who work at a clinic. It works really well. I do have a clinic space that I just started to use, but I don't know that. I think I'm going to stay primarily virtual because it works really well. Yeah. Do y'all have any other questions? I think my next slide is the thank you, do you have questions slide. So I guess I talked fast because I think they gave me 90 minutes. Normally when I do talks, they're 60 minutes. So apparently I'm ready to talk for only 60 minutes, but I'd be happy to help y'all with your voices or anything else to do with this if y'all have any questions.
Are there any online resources that you would recommend for practicing some of these different aspects, parts of the recipes, as you said?
So it depends exactly what you want to do. So there's a lot of softwares that you can use to get information back about your voice, like pitch and resonance and different things. If you're like really wanting to technically get involved with how you're changing your voice, any sort of reading material is really good. So if you have a favorite passage in a book and you want to practice with that, there's websites that have monologues where there's every play under the sun is just listed online for free, and you can try. A lot of times those are good because they'll actually have notes about what the person is feeling. So I didn't go into this, but something that this is good for is emotional expression. So there's a lot of overlap with what I do in random other things, but a lot of times people will want to communicate a certain emotional message, and they also have a way that they're used to communicating that message, and they don't always match up. So like they just literally never get angry. So when they attempt to get angry, it doesn't sound any different. Or they sort of are uncomfortable with the idea of being excited about something. So when they're excited, they sound sad, whatever the mismatch is. And so when you use the monologues and they say like, be happy or sad or angry, whatever it is, then they can practice that voice, and you can talk about what components make the different voice emotions. And I think what else I use online, there's so much stuff. I use a lot of online materials that I make myself. I do have a boom card store, but I don't think I have any voice stuff up yet, but maybe I should put some stuff up. I don't know. Does that answer your question? Yeah. What kind of work do you do?
Thank you.
Are you a therapist? You said a licensed professional counselor?
Yes, I'm a therapist. My primary job, I supervise folks. I'm the assistant director of Mazzoni Center in Philly. We're one of the bigger LGBTQ health and behavioral health centers.
That's awesome. So I have a group that I run online that's for people who want to kind of have like a socially supportive place to work on their voices. And we had a counselor come recently, and it was interesting to see the two overlaps between the different kind of, right? Because I don't necessarily work on helping people change their experience with dysphoria so much as their voice. But that was a really good opportunity to kind of explore the games and how they mix in. So during the groups, we always have like whatever, like it might be we're ordering coffee at Starbucks, or it might be we're going to have would you rather, and everybody says would you rather do this or that, or just kind of different games to get people started. And I don't know if your center has anything like that, but if you have any sort of situation where you're virtually getting people online, this kind of play, whether or not it's because of voice or just to be comfortable, is really good. Because when you're playing a character, you're not thinking from the point of view of me being this voice. You're like, oh, I'm playing this other person that has this totally other different personality than me, and I don't have to worry about anything because they're imaginary. And then it can make people be a lot more comfortable. So,
I put a link to the resources in the chat.
Oh, cool. Thank you, Fiona.
Mm-hmm.
You use a lot of terms like glottal and fry and all these. Are these things defined on your website, perhaps, or somewhere?
I listed them in the slide that was like the slide.
Long slide.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me see. So I do not have definitions up. I probably could, but I can go through them since we do have a few minutes left. So
I'm thinking, yeah, that might be helpful now, but also just in the future, I'm going to forget what does it mean to be fry in your voice.
yeah, I think I put up a blog post that was about the difference between a couple of the terms, but I haven't gone through and defined them all. But I could. I would certainly be happy to. So some of these things people are probably familiar with, and some of them they're not. There's a few just helpful tips I can give while we talk about this thing that I had originally told you not to read. So breath support, a lot of people take really big breaths. So if you think about your diaphragm, it's this big muscle that's underneath your ribs, and it's like the size of a giant dinner plate. And inside of your larynx, you have your instrument, your vocal folds, which are like the size of a dime or smaller. So you're taking this huge amount of breath and trying to put it through your tiny instrument. And if you hold back and use a smaller breath, it can make your voice be able to be controlled more and sound more pleasant in the way that you like, because you're not trying to push so much air through. Our system isn't designed for speech, it's designed for breathing, and like our body biologically wants to get as much air in as we can to sustain life. But then if we want to use that for an instrument, we need to give it less breath. Good posture changes our voice. If we're sitting upright, that is going to sound a little bit different than if we're sitting down here, right? And I know we all hunch a little bit. Height of your larynx, we talked some earlier. You can have it where if you swallow, it goes up, and you can push it down with your throat and have it get a longer tube. Thyroid tilt. So that's like adorable. I just have the most adorable voice. And the opposite is if your voice is really flat. This isn't tilted at all. This is my thyroid. And if you want to find it, if you feel on the outside of your throat, you have a bump that sticks out. Right underneath the bump, there's a little indentation. And if you do a fake cry, you're going to feel a shifting there. And that shift is right because you have two cartilages. You have the thyroid on top. When that shifts, your finger's going to go in a little bit more. And if you want people, so this is super helpful for voice feminization. You can have, so if I'm making my voice really adorable, then I can go way lower in pitch and still sound really feminine because I'm so adorable, so much tilt. Or I'm a higher pitch, so I'm going to be a higher pitch, but I'm really bored, super vertical. It's just not so genderable because it's so boring, most boring voice. That's bored versus adorable is thyroid tilt. Cricoid tilt is belting. Unless you want to belt or do like a Breslin accent, you don't need cricoid tilt. Vocal fold configuration is thin versus thick. This is another thing that's really important for your voice gender presentation. So if you're, I use a thick voice. This is very thick. If I want to be thin, then I'm going to thin my folds. Not as easy to teach quickly, but it's that puppy dog whimper that we talked about earlier also can help. It's very thin, and if you combine the puppy dog whimper and the adorable voice, they kind of go hand in hand. There's states that kind of attract to one another that when you do one thing, it'll do another. Phonation flow was the thing that you were asking about. So glottal fry down in here is if you have not very much air. Or breathy is when you have a lot of air. And it sounds nicest for our voices in general to have not too much and not too little air coming out. And a lot of time I find that people who try to change their voice gender presentation on their own will, from having a masculine sounding voice to feminine, will make their voice be really quiet and super breathy, which is not a great sound for wanting to be taken seriously and heard, but it kind of sounds more femme than, so that's kind of like cleaning up the way that we have air going through is something I do a lot. How you turn your sounds on and off. So there's 4 basic ways that we can turn our sounds on and off. We can have it where our sounds just start, where our vocal folds are closing before we start our breath, and they're closed when we turn off our breath. That's what I'm doing. This is no extra breathiness. If I have extra breathiness, but I keep my sounds short, they're going to be like this. I can also have a really gradual breathy onset and offset, or I can not have the extra breathiness, but I can be very smooth. I find a lot of people who are working on their voice like to have their voice smooth, regardless of the voice gender presentation. This is something you can do to sound nice, I think. It's not how I talk though. Okay, so false vocal fold position, we talked about this a lot. This is not having the pooping voice typically is what people would like. It's to be less constricted. And if you want to have the like, I am royalty, I am Disney princess or prince, because they're also attracted to when you listen to them, just very clean sound. And if you can get your breathing silent and keep your breath silent, the same openness when you're talking, you'll sound less constricted, and it's more pleasant to listen to people if you're giving a speech if you don't have any constriction. I have an edge to my voice. I have some constriction. If I were to clean up it entirely, then it sounds smoother in one way. Okay, twang, that's meow, right? Those are narrowing in our throat, the space above our larynx and in our throat. Tongue blade position, that's the front of our tongue. I don't know. I used to work on this for voice feminization, and it does make your voice brighter, but it also makes you have a not precise sound. So now I'm working more on the back of your tongue. Your tongues are actually huge. Like, they take up most of our space here. So it's like this in here, and then you see a little bit of your tongue. Then you can have it, so tongue root position, you can think about the back of your tongue being up against your molars, so it's high, or it can be sitting where you're not touching your top or bottom molars, that's mid, or it can be down by your bottom molars. There's the kind of the three sounds you get depending on where the back of your tongue is. The velum closure amount, that's what I was talking about, your nose gate at the back of your mouth. The g-ing or e, how much closure you get there. Jaw position, most people just keep the jaw position the same. If you don't have an abnormal jaw position, you don't change it. Lip position, if you have them more pursed, it's actually a little bit better for sounding masculine just to purse your lips a little bit, and for sounding feminine to have a little bit more lip spread. Most people have a pretty mid position, but it varies. Amount, location of anchoring, postural influence. So if you sit up, it sounds better. And then you can also give yourself more support, especially if you're working on your voice, by having, like, think about it, your vertebrae are stacked all on top of one another. Your head is over your sit bones, and you tighten if you want to anchor. You can, if you want to anchor your head and neck, you can flare your nostrils and just make everything very tight. And then I'm very supported. And if you really want to do some things like opera or belting, then you're really going to need to have good anchoring. But most people don't anchor for speech unless they have accents that use belting. Pitch. Most people can figure out pitch on their own. Another thing that people will do is, I don't know how to feminize my voice, so I'll just kind of talk way up here. And there's a better way. So helping them know about these other things is fantastic. Using a wider pitch range is more feminine. Using a narrower pitch range is stereotypically perceived as more masculine, and like a kind of in-between size and location from high to low is more androgynous. With pitch, people who have voices that are perceived as more androgynous tend to use less of the pitch slides up, pitch slides down, and they'll use the high and low notes. So I'd like this versus I'd like this, or I'd like this, right? It's like I picked this note or this one or this one. Doesn't convey gender as much with your voice. Emphasis, how you provide stress. We talked about that earlier. Volume is more masculine, and because, they're not varying the pitch as much. They don't have the pitch glides up. Downdrift is another masculine perceived pitch pattern, because if you're not using your pitch glides up, if you're mostly just using your pitch glides down, then you're going to end up lower at the end of the sentence, right? Mathematically. How you pronounce an accent. Sometimes I have clients who have acquired an accent to sound like the gender that they want to present as, like British, or Southern. I very much would love to sound like this. This is my femme voice. And so sometimes it's undoing an accent and sometimes it's gaining one, because this is how I'd love to sound just all the time. How fast do you talk? So a lot of times, if I just get my clients to slow down, they will sound more like what they want to sound like literally just slow down. And I think that there's a discomfort associated with speaking in a voice that doesn't sound right that can make people speed up. But yeah, just literally just slow down a little bit, which is super easy to try. Language, what language you pick. So the last three here, I don't really focus on very much. Nonverbals is important if you're getting misgendered before you start talking, that you can sort of pay attention to other people that you know who are being gendered the way that you want to be gendered, and imitate some of the things that they do before you start talking, so that people don't misgender you before you get a chance to use your voice. But that's about the only context that I really talk about this. And I misspelled expressions. Non-linguistic vocalizations. This matters to people. If Okay, so my sneezes are ridiculous. I literally sneeze like this. Achoo! Achoo! It's not very masculine. So if I want to sound more masculine when I sneeze, I'm gonna have to open up my throat, right? I have to work on it. Or the opposite, right? I can have a smaller throat if I want to sound more like that, though I really don't recommend sounding like my sneezes. Coughing, like big throat versus small throat, or laughing, like just getting a little bit extra twang or openness really helps a lot with having your non-linguistic vocalization sound like the gender presentation that you want. And then language. So anybody of any gender presentation can effectively use any language, but there are stereotypes in our culture. So and a lot of these things, right, like the things I told you that are stereotypes are going to be different depending on your culture. I didn't point that out, and I think that's a really important point. So if I'm working with an Australian client, then that client isn't going to want to use the same cultural patterns, right? A Southern client is going to have somebody say ma'am and sir at the gas station, at the fast food restaurant, but somebody in New York, nobody's going to talk to you, much less say sir or ma'am, right? Like totally different experiences based on where you are, and how you want to use your voice is different based on the culture that you're in. Here in Texas, like we tend to be the same in the area you're at, but language. So if I'm like, well, I hope you have a very lovely day. Would you please kindly take a seat there? Very indirect, descriptive. I wouldn't mind so much if you could just give me a moment, right? That's probably going to sound femme. Whereas if I say, go sit right there. Yeah, go sit down now, right? Like it's going to be perceived as more masculine. So any language can be gendered any way. Any voice can be gendered any way, but we just kind of live in this binary gendered world where the people who set up the system that we use benefit from having things be binary gendered, and so it's continuing to persist. And helping people have their voice gender presentation match their own identity can help with having people be more comfortable navigating this gender binary world. And I think there's also a lot of power in helping people be able to have their voice not be automatically perceived as gendered. I know one person who works at a tattoo parlor and has 3 voices that they use. So if a little old lady comes in, hi, thank you so much. Let me help you with this little cross that you wanted to get on your wrist. Yeah, did you want it right here? I'll hold your hand. It's going to be just fine. You know, like that's going to be a very different voice than they're going to want to use with the big football players who are going to like, hey, which tattoo you want, man? Don't worry, it won't hurt. Sit down. You know, like it's powerful to be able to manipulate your voice to have the effect that you want. Or maybe we just want to keep them guessing and not be very clearly gendered when we speak. And so the more you play, the more you can kind of explore your own voice and decide what sound you want and be able to adjust for different situations and get the result that you want, right? I mean, another way to think about it is your voice is a gift. So I am gifting you my voice. And if the voice that I'm using with you is more like this, then it's probably not a very nice gift. And you're probably not going to want to listen to me very long. But if I choose a voice that's really nice to listen to, that's very open and pleasant and smooth, then this is literally the gift that I'm giving you. Like I am gifting you my voice. I want you to hear me. I want you to feel good. Because going back, people not only perceive what our emotion is, but they have a takeaway of what that emotion is for themselves. So if I say to somebody, I'm so sorry, I don't know what I did, I'm just not really sure, then they're going to kind of have an unsettled feeling. And when they think back to my words, they're going to remember that unsettled feeling. If I want to give a speech and I want people really to understand the impact of these words, I can change how I say them. So now I'm off topic, but do y'all have any other questions? It was a really great discussion. Y'all asked me some really excellent questions. And I appreciate y'all staying and sitting for the whole thing too. That was really lovely. So I hope that this is helpful in your own work.
Thank you very much. Great presentation.
Thank you very much.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. If we have no more questions, I'll go ahead and wrap up. Yeah, y'all too. Bye, guys.